Welcome back to another class of Principles and Practices of Management. And in the previous session, we had started with Unit 4, wherein we talked about managerial control. Now, under managerial control, we had started with the concept of controlling. We learned about the meaning of controlling, and we also talked about some one or two definitions pertaining to the topic of controlling. And then we moved on to a topic called as characteristics of control, wherein we saw different characteristics of control, such as it being a dynamic process, being a managerial function, it being a continuous activity, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we've explained all of these points regarding characteristics of control. So today we're moving on to another topic. Today we'll be dealing with the topic regarding the need or the objectives of control. Why exactly does a firm have to have this particular function of management termed as controlling? Okay, what are the various reasons that we need to have the controlling function? Now, when we're talking about a good control system, it is required for these various purposes. Okay, so here I've listed some 8 purposes or some 8 reasons why we should have controlling. There could be more, there could be less, depending upon which paper or which website you're reading it from. Okay, so let's just go through the ones that I've listed out here. So the first point is accomplishing organizational goals. Now, of course, the main purpose of setting up of any business is to achieve the goals, right? You don't start a business without any purpose. You don't start a business without any intention. So controlling basically helps to accomplish these organizational goals. Now, the controlling process is going to be implemented in order to take care of your different plans. Remember, planning and controlling go hand in hand, right? We already spoke about this with regards to the different characteristics of controlling. We talked about how planning is the first step, whereas controlling is said to be the last step, and they should go together if the organization wants to achieve its set goals. So with the help of controlling, deviations which we see, any mistakes, any movements which do not lead to the obtainment of the objectives will be immediately detected, and corrective action also can be taken immediately. Okay, once you see the problems, you can divert the course of your actions in order to, or you can correct the course of your actions to achieve your organizational goals. So therefore, the difference between the expected results and the actual results is going to be reduced to the minimum. That is, in a sense that the standards are your expected results. Okay, you've expected 10 units of production, and you will also produce maybe 9 units or 10 units or even 11 units of production. We're trying to reduce this difference between the standard and the actual production. So in this way, our controlling will be helpful to achieve the goals of the organization. Okay, point number 2, making efficient use of resources. As we've been saying in the previous session also, as I said earlier, any organization should try to make effective use of its resources. That is, no wastage in terms of material as well as costs. Okay, so controlling makes it possible to use human and physical resources efficiently. So remember, when we were using the term resources, we're not only referring to our physical resources like your machines, money, and all that. We're also referring to our human resources as well. Okay, so best utilization of your human resources as well as your physical resources. Now, under controlling, it is ensured that no employee deliberately delays his work performance. In a sense, none of the employees will be purposely, not doing the work so as to reduce his workload and all that. Okay, so in the same way, wastage of all physical resources is also going to be checked. As we've said again and again, it's trying to reduce the cost of the resources, and it's trying also to reduce wastage of resources. Okay, so it helps to make efficient utilization of your resources. And then you have point number 3, improving employee motivation. Now, through the medium of controlling, the effort is going to be made to motivate the employees. Okay, with the help of controlling, the organization can make an effort to motivate the employees. The implementation of controlling will make the employees to work with complete dedication, because they know that their work performance will be evaluated, and if the progress is satisfactory, then they will have their identity established in the organization. Okay, so it helps to motivate in a sense by ensuring that the employees are given some kind of remuneration, some kind of a boost, some kind of a perk towards the end once the work performance is being evaluated. Okay, it ensures that there is some kind of responsibility and also some kind of delegation of authority. At the same time, rewards also for those who do good in their job. Okay, so point number 4, ensuring order and discipline. Now, controlling tries or helps to also ensure order and discipline with the organization, because with the implementation of the function of controlling, all your undesirable activities, right, like theft, corruption, delay in work, uncooperative attitude of workers, all of these are going to be checked. Now, the question arises, how? How does it exactly ensure order and discipline? It helps to ensure order and discipline because we're always keeping a check on the number of resources we're having, the production that we're doing. Okay, we are always keeping in check your physical resources, your human resources as well, and then money also. We're always keeping all of these in check. Therefore, we're able to ensure there is order and discipline. There will be no theft, there will be no corruption, and there will also be no delay in work as well. And employees also, they will cooperate with the objectives or with the orders given to them by their superiors. And then we have point number 5, finding out deviations. So we already know, because we've been talking about it over and over again, that controlling is nothing more than comparing the standard with the actual, finding out deviations and correcting these deviations, right? So the control process will be required to find out any deviations in performance, small deviations, large deviations. So there may be changes when it comes to situations, economic policies may be altered, and then you will also have changes in the production, changes in the schedule. All of these may affect the input as well as the output as well, which ultimately affects the goals of the organization. Okay, so if there's a change, let's say in economic policies, today you're allowed to sell with one country, whereas maybe the next day you're going to be at war with that country. So if you're at war with that country, then you're no longer able to sell with that country. Okay, so if that happens, then the economic policies will be changing. So there could be problems with reaching your production, with selling out your goods. Okay, so these are the deviations that may arise. So it tries to find out these deviations and the reason why these deviations occur, and because all of these factors will directly or indirectly affect the goals of the targets. So the comparison has to be made between the objectives that have been set and the actual performances, which will help to find out these deviations. And once deviations have been found out, the control system will help to correct these deviations. And sixth point we have there, measuring progress. Now, while planning various activities in the organization, the fundamental goals and objectives are going to be established. The moment you start the organization, you will be starting first with determining the objectives and the goals of the organization, right? So it will be essential to know whether the things that are happening are as per the objectives that have been set or not. And the control process will be required to establish or to ensure that everything is occurring in conformity with the plans that have been adopted by the firm. Okay, the control process will try to ensure that when they're working, when all the employees are working, when all the functions basically in the organization are being carried out, that everything will be done according to the plans and objectives of the organization. And then we have point number 7, judging accuracy of standards, to ensure that while we're performing the work, we're being very accurate with the work. Okay, that the manager compares the actual work performance along with the standards when he is carrying out the function of controlling. So in this situation, the manager will try to find out whether the laid down standards are more or less than the general standards, and in this case they'll need to be redefined. Okay, so what they're doing here in case of judging accuracy of standards is nothing more than just trying to figure out whether the actual performance and the standard performance are in line with each other. If they're not, then redefine them. Okay, just change them. Just try to find a common point between those. And finally, we have improving performance. So when we're talking about improving performance, management of the organization is not possible at all without an effective or without a normal control system. If there is no controlling, management function is said to be incomplete. So it not only helps in finding out deficiencies in the performances, okay, in finding out the problems in the work that has been done, but it will also help in improving the functions of the organization. It will also help in improving the work being done by the organization. So when timely information is available at every level, then performance will be studied continuously, and as such, efforts may be made to improve the results. Now, in the absence of a control process, in the absence of a control system or a control function in the organization, management will not be able to know, right? They'll not be able to compare whether they'll not be able to compare between the actual and the standard, and they'll not be able to assess the work that has been done on a regular basis, and at the same time they may not be able to take corrective actions at the right time in order to help increase efficiency and in order to improve performance. Okay, so without having an effective control system, it will be difficult for the management to improve the performance, because they'll not be able to compare between the actual and standard. So they'll not know if there is any problems, if there are any deficiencies. So therefore, controlling is very important if you want to improve the performance of the organization. Okay, so these are the reasons why we require controlling in the organization. So moving on, the next topic is prerequisites of a control system. What is required in order to have an effective control system? Prerequisites of control system. Now, control system, when we're saying, again, as we're saying, controlling, it is part of the various functions of management. So if it's part of various functions of management, it means that they cannot operate, controlling itself cannot operate in isolation. It needs a lot of different functions to work around with it. So a number of other functions are also required for controlling to be performed effectively. Now, the factors that we see here are the main 4 factors that are required or that are essential for making control system useful. Okay, so the first function we have is planning. Then you have action, delegation of authority, and prompt flow of information. Now, these are self-explanatory. However, we are going to compare them, we're going to explain them with regards to the controlling function. Okay, so let's start first with the first prerequisite here, which is planning. Now, planning is the first prerequisite for making control effective. As we've said, again, I've repeated also, planning and controlling go hand in hand. Without planning, there cannot be controlling. Therefore, it is said to be the first most important element for a control system. It is the first prerequisite for making control effective. Now, planning basically involves a setting of objectives and then deciding upon the appropriate course of action. So first of all, the goals of the organization will be set. And then after that, if you have any if the organization is large, you'll have departments, right? So once the organizational goals are set, then the departmental goals will be set. And under the departmental goals, you'll have all these sub-departments. So all these goals will be set one by one. It will be a hierarchical setting of goals. So the objectives are the targets for the achievement of which all energies are going to be pooled together. The objectives are what the firm wants to achieve, and for the purpose of achievement of these objectives, all the different functions of management, all the resources within the management are going to be working towards that one target or that one objective. Now, the objectives should be specific in nature. They should not be vague, they should not be unclear, they should be very clear, they should be very specific, so that their achievement may be determined. Okay, you cannot have an objective such as, I want to reach the moon. Okay, basically that's just an idiom which means that I want to reach a higher standards. I want to land on the stars also, right? People often say that. I want to land on the stars. I want to aim for the moon, shoot for the stars. They say all that. So these are very vague, very, just phrases which are used in literary terms, but cannot be used when it comes to management. It has to be very specific. Within the next 10 years, maybe let's say, give an example, within the next 10 years, I want to have 1 crore of profit. That is a specific objective, okay? And these are the objectives that are specific will ensure that achievement will be easier to be made. So the predetermined course of action should be used to reach various objectives, or the course of action that has been set should be used in order to achieve the objectives of the organization. So that is what planning pertains to, creating, defining the first step towards movement. Okay, towards the movement of the actions of the organization. Now, control is concerned with finding out whether the objectives have been achieved or not. Remember, planning is the phase where we create all these objectives. So we start out with the goals. And controlling is that function which is concerned with finding out whether we have achieved the goals that we've set out for ourselves or not. Now, if the results are not according to the standards that have been set, then that means there are certain deviations. That means there are certain problems or there are certain flaws with how we've carried out the work. So controlling related to the finding out of deviations, and controlling is in fact is related to the finding out of deviations and as well as taking corrective measures as and when needed. So if the performance is low, then immediate steps should be taken to set things right. And control can be exercised only when objectives are set, and plans will be effective only when they have been properly implemented. So control cannot be exercised without planning. At the same time, planning planning must always move before controlling. Okay, control cannot exist without planning, and planning should always go ahead of controlling. Okay, always remember that. Okay, I think that'll be easy to remember because keeping in mind the different functions, right? We've always given the hierarchy where it goes. It starts with planning and ends with controlling, like that. Okay, so always remember planning must move before control, and it's essential to first plan out and then exercise control for proper implementation of your plans. Okay, so that is the first prerequisite of the control system. And moving on, the second prerequisite of control system is action. Now, you've set up your plans. Okay, you've set out your plans and then you've carried out the work. However, in case there are any mistakes, certain action should be taken. Okay, as you said, if there are any deviations. So timely action on the part of manager is very important for exercising control. This is your second prerequisite. Manager should be giving proper guidelines to his subordinates to undertake your different functions. The manager should be able to guide the employees properly. Now, instead of finding out faults later, it'll be better or be proper to guide first so that things are done in a systematic manner. So what this means, or what this particular sentence that I just read out refers to, is that healing is better than cure. Okay, healing is better than cure, meaning, well, we should take corrective actions right now, or we should ensure that we're working or we're walking along the correct lines right now, rather than in the future, later, finding out mistakes and correcting them, because that's going to be costly, right? Going through the entire process all over again. Now, besides all precautions, there may be some deviations. However, despite all the actions that you're taking to prevent mistakes, there may be some mistakes, there may be some deviations. So these deviations, if the management or if the employees encounter them, they should be reported immediately, because if you make one mistake, okay, let's take, for example, if you make a mistake with your journal entries, okay, if you've made a clerical error, in a sense, you've recorded the wrong numbers, okay, instead of plant and machinery, let's say you're supposed to put 10,000, but you put it as 1 lakh. Now, that same mistake will be carried forward to your ledger accounts. That same mistake will be carried forward to your cash book. That same mistake will be carried forward to your trial balance and eventually to your balance sheet and profit and loss account. So it leads to a huge error ultimately. A small error leads to a huge error ultimately if it's not corrected immediately when you notice it. Okay, so the same also applies to this particular thing about action that we're talking about. Okay, to this particular point. So the managers or the employees, the moment they notice any deviations, they should report them at the earliest, because any delay in reporting will delay a corrective action also. Okay, you will not be able to correct them immediately, so it will lead to a bigger problem. So managers should give the instructions in such a way that whenever performance is below standards, then it will be reported to the appropriate authority. The moment they realize that, okay, we're not doing so well, okay, there's a loss here, there's a problem here, the moment the employees realize that, they should report them immediately to the higher authority. So there should be quick action to take remedial steps, and there should also, because there will be no use of reporting a deviation if it's not corrected at the earliest. Again, as I've said, if you've noticed a mistake right from the journal entries, but you're not reporting it until it has reached the balance sheet, imagine the entire process you have to go through all over again. So it's a headache, right? So because of that, they're saying that remedial actions should be taken immediately. Okay, any problems, any deviations should be reported immediately, so as to allow it to be corrected also at the earliest. In order to make control effective, the manager should give proper guidelines for doing the work. Reporting a deviation, taking corrective action, all of these should be talked about. They should be dealt with the moment the employee joins the organization, a moment a work is being transferred to the employees also. Now, in the absence of an action plan control, in the absence of an action, planning and controlling may not be exercised effectively. Okay, so if there is no action, there's no point of doing all this controlling as well. All right, so the third prerequisite we have there is delegation of authority. So now when we're talking about delegation, you know what delegation means, right? Giving some power, giving some authority, some responsibility to somebody who is below you, right? So delegation of authority is also said to be a very important aspect, a very important element when it comes to controlling system, because controlling process involves evaluating performance, ascertaining deviations, and taking corrective measures. Now, all of these steps would require some kind of authority. You cannot just, jump out of nowhere and say, okay, we made a mistake, let's correct it. Okay, if you're just an employee, just like another employee, they may say to your other employees, your co-workers may say, why bother? Let somebody else do it. Why bother? Let the superior do it. Or why bother? Let the next person who's going to do the job do it. Okay, so you need some kind of authority to be able to certain deviations and to take these corrective measures. So when you ask, let's say, for example, if you ask a production manager to increase production by, let's say, 20%, 30%, then he will be requiring certain amount of authority to employ workers, authority to give motivation to employees, authority to give incentives to the workers, and also to take any sort of disciplinary action in case of inefficient workers. Okay, so if you're asking for something to be done, we should also give them some kind of authority in order to carry out that particular responsibility. That's what this point means. So unless otherwise proper authority is delegated, control will not be possible. Okay, if you're not giving them any kind of authority, then controlling will not be possible, because people may not listen to them, right? You will not listen to your co-worker, you'll not be listening to your classmate unless and until a professor has told them, you are the CR, you are the class representative, you are the one who can lead the students. Okay, so if something like that has not been mentioned, if specific authority has not been provided, then controlling system will not be effective. Okay, so the fourth point, or the fourth prerequisite we have, is prompt flow of information. Prompt flow of information means quick flow of information, fast feedback, fast movement of anything that you have to convey. So there should be a proper feedback of information for exercising control. Now, feedback is when, okay, there's an error here, we'll tell the superiors immediately. That is feedback. Not just the superiors to tell the employees, but the employees, when they're telling the superiors what the problem is. That is referred to as feedback, and also in flow of information. Now, the performance of subordinates should reach the manager at the earliest. This will enable the manager to rectify any kinds of deviations or any wrong measures that are there. And the steps which have been suggested for improving efficiency also should reach the subordinates at the earliest, so that they are able to act upon the advice. So basically, there should be an upward and downward flow of information, and this upward and downward flow should be very quick, without any problems, without any hesitancy. Okay, the time factor is very important when it comes to reporting, because if reports are delayed, then the measure to improve it will also be late. Okay, if we are unable to tell the superiors immediately that these are the problems, it'll take a lot of time to decide upon what corrective measures are to be made. And if they take time, then the entire performance also will be lagging. You'll not be able to work because you don't know what to do. You don't know how to correct the steps. Okay, so this could cause in the breakage of the performance of the employees of the organization. Okay, so these are the four requisites: planning, action, delegation of authority, and prompt flow of information. Okay, so let's deal with one more topic, and this topic is with regards to steps in the controlling process. What are the different steps one must take when it comes to the controlling process? So there are basically 4 steps that we see here, and these 4 steps, of course, again, it depends upon the book you're reading, depends upon the professors, depends upon the theorists. Now, controlling is a continuous process. It is not applied when everything else is done. Okay, there may be, of course, some inbuilt controls in the with the managers itself. They may have some inbuilt control systems, but despite that, there may be some difference in standards to be achieved and difference in the actual performance. Even if you have controlling standards already set, there may be chances of deviations. And this main problem, or the main reason why we have controlling, is because of your human resources. Why? Because humans tend to make mistakes. Okay, humans have limitations, they are flawed species, and they may make mistakes. Therefore, we have to have a controlling process. So let's look at the different steps that we're having. The first step is establishing performance standards. As we've been saying over and over again, it starts with planning, where we set out the different objectives, we set up the different goals of the organization, right? So if it starts with planning process, it means it should start, the controlling process entirely should start with establishing performance standards. Now, although the setting of goals and standards are part of the planning process, yet it also plays a very important role or a very important part in controlling. Now, the main objective of controlling, of course, is to guide the business towards the desired target, to ensure that the work of the organization is moving towards the achievement of one particular goal. Okay, that is the goal of the organization. So therefore, if the employees or if the members of the business are well aware of the target to be achieved, it'll result in more awareness also about the target. Okay, if they know what they're supposed to do, it'll give them more awareness of the job that they're supposed to deal with. So the managers must communicate these goals and objectives very clearly to the employees without any ambiguities, which means without any any kind of jargon, without any kinds of problems. It should be very clear. If the manager wants the workers to walk straight, they should tell them walk straight. Don't tell them walk north, walk south, walk, all these things. Walk straight means walk straight. Okay, so that's what it means when we're talking about performance. The managers should communicate the goals very clearly. An organization in which everyone is in fact working towards a common objective has a much better chance to grow and prosper. Now, some strategic points are there which should be selected as controls or yardsticks. And under this, we have Professor Newman, who has suggested some 4 guidelines for selecting strategic points. Now, I'll be sending you the notes for this chapter. I'll be attaching them because there are quite a few things under these points, right? So I'll be attaching the notes as well with the class when I'm posting it with you. Okay, right. So Professor Newman has suggested 4 guidelines for selecting strategic points. Firstly is that the control points should be timely. They should be made on time so that they may be able to reveal significant deviation in time, thereby saving further loss. The control points should be made on time so that, again, if it's delayed, then it will lead to much bigger loss, right? So it should be on time. And control points at the same time should be such as to permit economical observation and reporting. They should be made in such a way that they be allowed to observe and also to report based on to ensure to help the economy of the organization, okay, economical points of the organization. And then control points, especially for executives at higher levels, should provide comprehensive coverage, especially when it comes to the people at the higher levels. Okay, the higher level management should cover it, should give a more detailed explanation. And control points also should be such as would promote balanced performance. It should ensure that there is a stability in the performance of the workers as well. Okay, so that is step number 1. Step number 2, measuring actual performance against the set standards. So now, in the first step, we have already established the performance standards. So in the second step, we have to compare how much we've performed with the performance standards. Okay, we have to compare the actual with the set standards. Now, the immediate action that the managers need to take after being made aware of the goals of the organization is to measure the actual performance and compare them with the standards that have been already set. This will help to identify if the plan is actually working as it was thought to be. If there are any problems, that means the plan should be changed. Okay, so once the plan has been implemented, the task of the managers is to monitor the plans and to evaluate. Okay, once planning, as we know, is a continuous process. It's not just like you've planned it, you've set out the objectives, and you disappear straight away. No, you have to go through, right? You have to make sure that the planning, you have to be from the start till the end to ensure that if there's any problem, you can change the plans. So managers must be ready with an alternative plan, or they must be ready to suggest any kind of corrective measures in case the plan is not going as was planned, okay, as was intended. So this can be done only when managers are measuring their actual performance. If they are not measuring the performances, you don't know what's the difference. You don't know whether you're actually performing well or you're not doing well. So the way performance can be evaluated is to measure it in monetary terms by hiring financial experts. One of the methods to measure performance is through monetary terms, not just by calculating how many units you've produced, but also in terms of money, how much you've sold. So in order to do that, a firm may hire financial experts. Now, this particular step of controlling is very useful and very helpful in detecting future problems and issues, and it's also essential for taking decisions immediately so that the company is going to be able to recover from any future losses. Okay, so this is a very important step when it comes to the controlling process. All right, third step is determining if the performance matches with the standard. Now, checking if the performance matches with the standards is also a very important step. It is in this step, the results are going to be measured with the standards that have been already set. Okay, the results are going to be measured. It's quite similar to the second point. And when you have measured these standards with the set standards with the actual standards, the main purpose for this comparison is, number one, to find out if there are any deviations, and number two, to determine the reasons for permissible limits are also fixed. Okay, to determine the how much deviation is allowed also. Okay, so these are the main purposes why we are comparing the actual with the standard. Now, when the deviations are within these prescribed limits, then there's no cause for worry. Okay, like for example, if you said the standard is 10, you're producing 9. Okay, if producing 9 is quite close to 10, right? So still allowed. However, if your standard is 10, you're producing 5, then you'll have to be worried. Now you have to figure out why, what happened, how you're going to change it. Okay, so if the deviations are more than the allowable limits, then it is a call for urgent action. Now, this is also known as management by exception. Other than this, we'll deal with other things. Okay, other than performance of 9 units, we should deal with other performances. So when things are going as per the plan, or when they are within the allowable limits, then the management is not required to take any action or to take any note of it. However, if the performance is not up to the level, then it should be brought to the notice of the top management for taking corrective action. Okay, so if that's why it's said as management by exception. Except this will deal with everything else. That's what it means. So if the manager gives attention to every little deviation, then they will not have a lot of time left for important things, right? That is why they're only going to be dealing with very important things only. Okay, very huge deviations. Now, when the actual performance is not up to the level, then causes for it should be studied, causes for it should be pinpointed, and necessary steps should be taken so that performance is not adversely affected once again. Now, if no efforts have been made to rectify these problems or to change the standing of these weak areas, then the whole control process will be useless. It'll all be futile. It'll all be a waste of energy, a waste of resources. So whenever the performance is lower than the standards, the reasons for it should be immediately found out. And remember, when we're talking about lower than the standards, it should be we should follow a certain limit. Okay, as we've said again, let's say 10 units are the standard, and let's say the permissible limit is 2 units. 2 units meaning if you're producing 9 units, it's fine. If you're producing 8 units also, it's fine. But lesser than 8 units means it should be rectified immediately. Okay, so the last step is taking corrective action and re-evaluating the standards. As we've said earlier, the main purpose of controlling is to find the problems, find the deviations, and take corrective actions. Therefore, taking corrective actions is the last step in the controlling process. Now, corrective measures need to be taken when there is discrepancy. The correct actions should be made to protect against any losses and also to stop these problems from reappearing in the future. Now, this is said to be the last step, but is said to be the most important step in controlling process, because whenever the performance is lesser than the standards, efforts should be made immediately to rectify it. Now, whatever the reasons for low performance, efforts should be made to achieve the organizational goals. We have to study what the reasons are for the low performance, and we should try to achieve the organizational goals immediately. Of course, there is no fixed control process, or there is no universal control process that can automatically rectify the mistakes in the system. So it is the action which is required to set the things right. Okay, it is the action of the firm which is required to correct the things. Sometimes the targets are not achievable even with more efforts. Now, if the targets are not achievable, as you said earlier, let's say your main objective is to reach 100 crore in 10 years. Now, of course, if there are problems like we're having now, pandemic, right? We're having a pandemic, and as such, there's quite a fall in the market. There's quite a low, almost like a recession. So in that situation, we may not be able to achieve our goals. So we can change our goals instead. Okay, we can, instead of changing how we're working, instead of forcing the employees to work more, let's change our goals instead, make them more realistic. Okay, so goals can also be revised, not just the efforts of the employees. Now, the correct action may involve review of plans, review of goals, change in the methods of work, change in the assignment of tasks, change in existing techniques of direction, as well as change in the organization structure. Okay, by making all of these changes, we may be able to take corrective actions. Now, of course, the corrective actions will generally involve the top management. Okay, because they are the ones who can change the goals. The top management is the one who sets the goals and standards. So it generally involves the top management, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be made by the lower level management also. So it's said by some persons that taking corrective action is not a part of control, but it's said to be as a separate managerial function altogether. And the overlapping of control function only shows the unity of the manager's job. Therefore, it shows that management function and management process should be an integrated one. It should come together with all the different activities pertaining to controlling as well. Okay, so these are the 4 steps with regards to controlling process, and we'll stop here for today.